Good, thank you. It's been a long day already. I think Daniel's probably halfway through his day.
Yeah.
He's got a fancy microphone too.
Yeah, I know. It looks kind of a little strange. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, good to see you guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. A lot of people probably know you already, but I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. Andy, starting with you.
Yeah, so my name is Andy Hiles. I'm I'm a professional Kanban trainer. I'm used to saying a pro Scrum trainer, but actually I'll lead with the ProKanban. Actually, is one of my proudest moments. I've been kind of in and around kind of agile spaces in large companies, small companies, cutting my teeth in experience of trying to shape product development teams and actually get make happy customers by delivering value, and that comes in many forms. But so that's me in a very, very short nutshell.
Thanks, Andy. Daniel, what about yourself?
Yeah, I'm fairly terrible at introducing myself. So yeah, my name is Daniel Vacanti. Like Andy, I'm a professional Kanban trainer as well. Been in the agile industry for way too long. I don't like to admit how long in polite company, but just way too long. Was around when we talk about Kanban for software anyway. Was around the beginnings of that. Was on the team that participated in the development of that, and got together with guys like John and Andy a little bit later to start the community ProKanban.org, which I think we'll spend a lot of time talking about today. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share some thoughts on that.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And for those of you watching, yes, you probably heard about the secret history of Kanban. There's already a link to that at the bottom of the screen, so I'll share that as well in the YouTube links afterwards. We're not going to go into that today. We're going to dig into the guide itself and ProKanban itself, what that's all about. We're going to really find out, where the rubber hits the road, what's Kanban guide all about, and why is it relevant for you people out there. So the link for the Kanban guide, it can be found at kanbanguides.org, and there, and there's some additional stuff there as well that might help you. And later on in this session, we'll go through the ProKanban.org website as well and make you familiar. But we're going to start with the guide itself. Before we get into flashing the guide up on the screen, Daniel, a question for you in terms of your motivation. Secret history aside and all that kind of stuff, what was your motivation behind actually getting behind a guide like this?
Getting around the guide, or getting around the whole ProKanban.org thing?
Producing a guide and ProKanban as well, I guess. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, so the guide specifically. Rightly or wrongly, there just seemed to be a lot of confusion in the marketplace around what Kanban is and what it isn't. And the word that I use, and I sometimes get in trouble for this, but I think it accurately describes it. I believe Kanban itself has been perverted over the years from the original intention of that Corbis team that we were on for all kinds of reasons. And so the guide is really just an attempt to hopefully consolidate and, more importantly, unify the community around what is the absolute minimum things that we need to call something Kanban, and really kind of get it back to its easier, simpler, more useful, more pragmatic roots. So that was motivation for the guide, and then just the community in general, the ProKanban.org community in general. The motivation for that was there really is no really safe, inclusive, diverse place to go to learn Kanban if you want to. And it's a shame that it's taken us this long, I think, as a community. Shame on us. It's taken us this long to create that safe space to learn about this stuff. So those are my big motivation. In 25 words or less, I guess those are my big motivations.
Can I add? I think that, so for me, I'm going to call myself an outsider, right? I think that's, I think I've come from a very Scrum background. Started off XP in Intel, and then heavy Scrum. I don't know, creating a new thing, and then kind of experimenting into the Kanban world back in Nokia days. And I think Kanban for me always came across as something that lived in a book. Right, and it was always, you had to buy the book, or you had to really dig into something to go and really truly understand it. And it was always seemed quite a much harder thing to kind of grasp, and less easy to figure out how to experiment with. And then you kind of find out, oh, okay, so actually core element wise, it's far more simple than we're actually kind of making it out to be. And I think for me, really welcoming, like I will say, like as an outsider, right? I know I'm not, but as an outsider, really welcoming having a guide that I can now point people to. And I'm not just talking about, look, you really need Kanban with your Scrum, and you really need to look at flow and managing your workflow. I can now actually go and point them to some kind of reference material. Just go and read this, right? And this is why I'm talking about this. And so for me, it's been hugely important.
Indeed, and the other thing as well, of course, was that when the guide was put together as well, we were very careful about not, forking the community, splitting the community. So we're really trying to unify. We really we're continuing to make efforts to reach out to anybody with flow in their name, or Kanban as well, and just try to see, can we have something that doesn't break what they do, so they don't have to kind of come up with their own guide. That basically there's one guy that kind of supports almost everything as best as we can. The kind of wording we use is like, it doesn't not support.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. And I want to give a special shout out to you, John, because I don't know how many people out there realize this. So there's the link. There's a Kanban guides link, where you can read the guide, and it's short and sweet. I think it's 8 pages. We're at 8 pages now or something like that. Very, 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 very simple. But to John's point, we were very conscious of not trying to alienate any other parts of people doing their own things with flow. And so John did a ton of work reaching out to like the Tame Flow people and the Kinevin people and all these, and he wrote up a whole bunch of addendums that kind of help give you an idea of how you might extend the simple guide with some of these other practices, which, like I said, it's very, very important to us that this is more about building bridges rather than, as you said, John, throwing up walls.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. So we're going to have a look at the guide itself, and I've just noticed I'm receiving a message about the chat, so just clicking on a message for the chat because it seemed to have been off for some reason. I don't know why. There's no messages coming in. Hopefully people are okay out there. So I'm going to throw up the guide, and that when we have the guide on screen, it means that we're going to be very small. But we need to read the guide, right? So we know what Danny looks like. We know what Andy looks like. And you're probably fed up of looking at me. So let's have a look at the guide, right? And I don't think it's fair to put the guide just in a little corner like that. So you just kind of give it a bit of space, okay? Yeah. So Daniel, we'll start off. We're going to walk through the guide for the people watching, right? So can you take us through the purpose of the guide and the definition of Kanban?
Yeah, and I don't know if we can say this, but I mean, I think this is maybe the appropriate place to say this is stay tuned, because there is a small update to the guide coming out, hopefully in the coming weeks. Our hope is to have it out before the end of the year. Honestly, it's mostly cosmetic. There's nothing terribly or structurally different, about the guide, but we should have that. I hope I can say that, John. I hope I'm okay. I'm not stealing any of your thunder in terms of in terms of launching that. But yeah, so yeah, the purpose of the guide, I think both like Andy said before and as John said before, is number one, we wanted one place, one kind of document that we could point people to. It's like you want to learn about Kanban. It's not some textbook thing. It's not some kind of secret society or whatever. It's like here are here's the essence of of Kanban. Here's what it is. What are the minimum set of practices that you need to be doing to consider yourself kind of doing Kanban? We're very later in the guide, and I think we'll get this. We're very explicit that what is represented in this guide is not meant to be exhaustive or complete. you'll almost certainly need to, and we say this, bolt on some other stuff, add on some other things. So yeah, the purpose of this guide was not to be comprehensive. It was like, what's the minimum set of things that we as a community can agree on? Okay, yeah, you're doing these things, you're doing Kanban. You may need to do other things, and those other things will probably be awesome, but this is the minimum you need to be doing Kanban.
Okay. And so there's a whole table of contents where we're going to go through the guide. And then you have a definition here where you're saying that Kanban is a strategy for optimizing the flow of value through a process that uses a visual pull-based system. And we say as well that value could be a variety of things. It could be customer value, end user value, it could even be knowledge value, and it could even be some kind of sustainable development goal. And then there's these 3 practices, really condense the practices down to really the minimal. So defining and visualizing your workflow, which is essentially the visualization of the Kanban board, and then actively managing the items, making sure that whatever you start, that you finish them. So they were important enough to start, so just finish them. So really really actively manage the aging. I love the work item aging chart and Actionable Agile, where you can kind of zap the red guys and say, can we just zap those guys? And who do we need to call today? Who do we need to email? Is it just us? Do we not finish something yesterday? And also, of course, making sure that work isn't, you don't leave work blocked. I use the metaphor of roadworks on a road, and you can leave roadworks there, but we're all going to be slower, right? Go ahead.
Can I jump in on it? So for me, this is drawing focus, right? So
yeah,
I guess there's so through the attention and looking at aging, right? And it really truly is drawing that focus down that typically, there'll be people out there watching and will recognize patterns where teams tend to get kind of like lost in, certainly when they're looking at Kanban boards, and depending on how they're working, but they tend to get kind of sometimes quite lost, in actually what are we trying to achieve, and the focus, and that kind of active management item is all around kind of creating that definition of focus, and I'm really trying to hone in on that kind of that flow value. And try to draw the team together, back. And again, it's that kind of principle of, what's the right thing to do as a team to be able to kind of optimize that flow. And aging, is a strategy, and that kind of that idea of really kind of focusing people in. Again, I don't know, it's one of those things. It's like it should be common sense, a lot of these things, but it seems to kind of, I don't know, get lost in the mix, right?
Well, and that's why I think this.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, John. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's why this definition is so important. I think Andy's hitting on all the reasons why this definition is so important. It's a bit unfortunate that we're using the word Kanban. Kanban is a terrible, terrible, terrible name for so many reasons, but it's the one that's out there. And so, but that's why the definition we talk about, it's a strategy of flow. I mean, anywhere in this document, you should be able to replace the word Kanban with flow, and you'll understand what we're talking about. So it's not a framework, it's not a methodology, it's a strategy, right? In general, it's a strategy it's made up of certain tactics. And in general, if you follow these tactics, you will have a shot at achieving flow. It's not to say it's the only way, but it is a way. So always think about it in terms of this flow.
And of course, what is agility unless you've got some kind of continual improvement? And so improving the workflow is important, right? You get people working together, and they have their columns and whatever, their policies and so on, and sometimes they're surprised, I can get rid of a column? Yeah, of course you can. It's like you can review how the workboard is working for you.
Oh, do I open the Jira box? I don't know. I've kind of said it and opened it, right? But do you know what? I was talking with the team this week, and we're talking about kind of actually just getting down and visualizing your workflow, and kind of actually starting to define the kind of the first item on this, and I was trying to encourage them just to forget the way the organization had set up Jira around them, and actually try and break it out into something like Miro or Mural or anything, paper, any way of, so they can like do that initial visualization, and then they can work to their own pattern. And it's kind of like it's coming back on that kind of idea of retrospectives, right? And then we continually look at better improvements of the way we're working, and that then in turn kind of goes into the second one, which is managing items in workflow. If you're continuously looking at it, right?
Indeed. And just want to make a comment as well for the viewers that I'm chatting to Restream.io, my stream provider, because the chat doesn't seem to be working. So I'm literally chatting to them at the same time. So hopefully we'll get this fixed during this session. That's why we're not getting any messages coming in. So
I'm seeing some messages come through on the chat, John. If that helps you.
Oh, okay. They're not coming through on my end. Okay.
Andy, do you see any?
Yeah. No, I can see the chat coming through.
Yeah.
Oh,
should we be calling? Should we be addressing some of these as they come through, John?
I should be able to flash them up on screen. So maybe I'll just try to reopen and just see, does it work on a different screen? Maybe that, just give that a go and just see whether that works.
So while John's doing that, Andy, I don't know. Do you want to, if you want to maybe talk about why Kanban? Kind of get into this section. I mean, why?
Why
as
not?
As an insider outsider guy, why Kanban?
Do you know my friends would be looking at me going, Andy, you're basically dumbing yourself down again in front of loads of people. Oh God, why? I was trying to talk in terms of, I try and kind of like lose all kind of, ties to whatever I'm talking about and talk about it in common sense terms and kind of mechanical process development, right? So anything you're doing for the sake of doing it is not worth doing at all, right? And just going through the motions in a kind of, just a non-thought process, not looking at improving and not really trying to think about why you're doing what you're doing, and I'm not going to pick on any particular framework or any particular way of working, but I think again it comes back to that kind of team behavior stuff for me, which is what does Kanban do especially well, which is that I'm just a big fan of visualization. Like if I around my office today, I've got just like all these pictures of stuff and things and workflow pictures I've been working on with teams this week, and I threw a whole cup of water over them earlier, but I'll try and fish them out earlier. But for me, the power is once you can show a team that is struggling, right? Let's pick a typical team that's struggling, either with overloaded work, overwhelmed with work, because they can't really cognitively see how their workflow is impacting their stress and actually slowing them down. Once you start to put those very, very cool basic elements in place and then start to work with teams, that's why you're really then starting to work with flow. You're not working on a framework and you're not working on a process. You're really, really trying to help that team optimize themselves and how they work together. And that builds flow, and that builds that kind of inspection process that we see with, I'm not going to call it Kanban, I'm going to try and call it flow, right? And that's really what we're trying to get to. And again, I keep going back to this common sense thing. For me, a lot of this is common sense. We just don't, I don't know, common sense is I don't know, common sense is just, it's not common, right?
Not so common. Yeah, exactly.
So let's address some of the comments now that finally I've got myself together. So so Andre, big smile. I'll keep smiling. And we got another one from Mudassir. Can you please emphasize on why you use Kanban? Who wants to take that?
Well, I think Andy just I just kind of went through that. I mean, fundamentally, if you're doing a job, your job exists probably to deliver value for a customer somewhere. And we believe one of the best ways to deliver that value is to focus on flow. And so, what is Kanban? It's a strategy to achieve that flow, so we can ultimately deliver value to our customers. I mean, that's
I
might kind of extend that. Just like optimize your life. It sounds really silly, right? Yeah. But put it in practice. That if you start to look at how you're tackling an objective, and you start to visualize that, and you start to actively manage that. We were chatting before we started the live stream. I'm currently sitting in a project house, right? I have a post-it sitting in front of me, which is create a Kanban board for this house. So we as a family unit can see all the tasks we're going to have to do, and who's going to do them and how we're going to get them done, and all those kind of things. And it's like, I don't think it's a choice. I think it's a, oh God, I don't do Star Wars. I'm feeling very Yoda-y, right? But do or do not. But I think it's one of those things, if you're going to do it, then, you might as well optimize what you're doing, and you might as well look at that flow piece, et cetera, et cetera. You kind of like, for me, it sits there with common sense again.
It also makes me very annoying because stuff stays in my backlog for a while. It's like my work in progress limit is whatever, but more stuff gets done, right? And a guy in Ireland, he did fairly well for himself, and he said something to me. He said, "Make peace with your to-do list." Sometimes some stuff will never be done, maybe shouldn't be done. But anyway, we digress.
I really like that. I like that. It's good.
Yeah. A few more comments. We're going to get into the white Kanban, dig into that a bit more. Andrew's saying wash my hands as well. Yeah, no problem. I know Andrew. He's a regular viewer. Thank you, Andrew, for joining. And so, a LinkedIn user, unidentified LinkedIn user, right? So I've seen lots of chatter around Agile being organic and Kanban being mechanistic. How would the panel address that? Andy, what do you think?
Oh, put it in my, I don't know. I don't see it. I don't buy into any of those words. Is that good enough? There's a terrible excuse and an answer, but what is? Oh God, we could open the box of what is Agile, right? The kind of this intent. Yeah. Look, my favorite way of describing all of these, and I'm going to nick it. I'm going to borrow it from Daniel. Tool for conversation, right? And Daniel know what I mean when I say that. And I will say the Scrum word, and it's a framework for having better conversations. And if you're going to pick Kanban out and kind of put it in a box, right, you're going to say it's another framework for having good conversations. Just they're directed in a slightly different way, right? Was it Scrimmers? So James Scrimshire, I think that. And thank you, James.
Okay.
Yeah, so I know James very well. He'll be laughing at me stuttering over this now. Thanks, James. But I don't know. I don't buy into that kind of organic and mechanistic thing. But I think you could get caught into any workflow process. Getting work done as mechanistic, right?
Yeah.
Depends how you pick to choose, right?
I can kind of relate to the point as well, though, because I had a recent example where, all the charts were saying it was almost like coronavirus. The cycle times were kind of going that way, and the throughput was kind of going that way, and the aging was going on that way, and opportune moment to talk about narrowing down on stuff, even maybe turning off the tap of stuff coming in, maybe. But I understood that it was more appropriate to have some human conversations, that there were some bigger concerns that were actually creating friction for people, so they couldn't even unlock to be open to that kind of a conversation. So I think I think all of us as practitioners will do what's right given the situation, and any client that I've ever had that used Kanban, we're really trying to understand what they're doing and come up with a flow that works for them. But at the same time, there are some things you need to do if you want to optimize flow, and sometimes these things are hard. Limiting work in progress, for example, controlling work in progress is a very, very difficult thing to do. So some people might think that's a bit mechanistic, but when they see the benefits of the improved flow and the calmness that I see with teams who have optimized their flow, they're getting more stuff done, everything's taking less time, they can actually have conversations with people. It's like night and day, and they're getting more stuff. And I think it's incredible, like from a situation where they were completely overwhelmed with work. Yeah. Daniel, any thoughts on this?
I mean, not really, other than whenever people, I don't know, people in the community are desperate to pigeonhole and categorize, and that I think that's just largely academic. I don't even necessarily see a difference between Agile and Kanban. So how you can say is one is this and one's the other. Like I said, that's academic, and I don't know that it really moves the needle on what we're trying to do at all.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at a few other comments here. A smile from Sunil. I think this might be James.
Hello, Sunil. Yep.
Hello, Sunil. And just a word of thanks to Daniel from Mudassir for your answer earlier. And Sunil, so shall we bring some role like Kanban champion or Kanban coach to implement Kanban? So that's something that we kind of deliberately avoided in the guide, wasn't it, having roles? In fact, the furthest we kind of went really was saying that we had Kanban system members. But what are your thoughts, Daniel, on the need for like Kanban champion or Kanban coach to implement Kanban?
I mean, the short answer is no. In fact, I might even go so far as to say absolutely not. To me, this is where, and I'm trying not to get in trouble talking of, because whatever I say, it's going to sound like I'm denigrating other frameworks, which I'm not. But this whole separations and roles and accountabilities and things like that makes very, very, very little sense to me. Because I'm a big believer in team, right? And as a team, we all win and we all fail together. So making sure that as a team we're doing the right things. That's the important thing. Now, if you need a coach to do that, I mean, fine. If you need whatever, but I mean, you shouldn't have to have that.
No, but I think actually, I absolutely agree. I was gonna wind you up and say yes. No, I don't. I don't think it's. I think maybe I'll reframe it slightly differently and see. And actually, I'd be interested in either of your thoughts, Dan and John. But it's often very hard to enthuse teams to change the way they work, right? And this is where you will see coaches come in and say, look, no, you really ought to, look at X, Y, Z. And I think maybe the question for me is, how can we, through ProKanban and the Kanban guide, how can we enthuse teams to actually take it upon themselves to start looking at this and doing more with it?
And a lot of that is about keeping it simple, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I personally, I know people hate it, but I'm a big fan of the sports metaphor. I mean, so yeah, you have players that are actually playing the game, but at some point you do have a manager somewhere who gets to decide who plays and what the tactics are and what the strategy are, and all of that stuff. And my guess is whatever company you're at, there is some type of management structure. So, if you have a management structure where your manager isn't first and foremost a coach, you've probably got a bigger problem than, should we be doing Kanban or not? I mean, I guess that's kind of how I would think about it. And if you have to bring in an outside coach because management can't do that type of stuff, I would say that's even a bigger sniff or smell test that things maybe aren't quite where they should be in terms of corporate culture and things like that. But that has nothing to do with Kanban. That's my own personal belief. Right?
Okay, so just checking some of the other messages here. So there's some of them feel like double up. I'm not sure, but I'll just bring it up and get. Have we dealt with this already? So I would add that the sooner you can get anything to your customers, the sooner it realizes value and exposes new risks and opportunities. And that's kind of where we're going as well, because when you manage items in progress, you can use all sorts of fancy techniques if you want to figure out the rank of items coming in and so on before you start them. But once you start them, just finish them. And because we actually don't know how valuable they are until they go live. And a lot of the time they deliver negative value, and sometimes they just don't deliver as much value as we thought, and other times many more times. So trying to this is kind of a strange kind of friction there between efficiency and effectiveness, and we want to kind of deliver faster so we actually find out so we can be more effective, so we can get feedback and respond quicker.
I mean, there's a huge amount of power in not delivering. And again, back in that whole visualization thing, where you have inefficiencies in workflow, you are not able to get to a release in without creating huge batches of risk. Highlighting that. And can be just as powerful. So, you want to optimize, but actually, again, kind of going back and looking at, the throughput / lack of, and looking at the amount of change. I'm very of the thought that any line of code introduces risk. Any line of code introduces risk. So even if you're saying I've got 100 changes, which equals 1 million lines of code or whatever that is, but any line of code can introduce risk. So actually being able to highlight that and the lack of the lack of throughput, and the lack of flow can be massively powerful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of the Lean UX Brigade, where they tried to build up evidence and stuff you should never even build in the first place as well. But that's for another live stream session, I guess. Another one here. So I think this is from James. Everyone gets battlefield first aid training, not just the job of the medic to patch people up. Absolutely. So we all need to learn about flow, really. Got a question from Ahmad here. How to measure the whip limit? So Andy, what approaches have you used to figure out what whip to use?
The strategy, or just actually? Well, I guess that was my kind of question with this. Is like the strategy, or the how to, right? I mean, there are multiple strategies for dealing with whip. For me, it actually almost falls into the it depends, and I think this is where it comes back to. Aging is probably the most crucial metric. And that kind of attention, when I was talking about that kind of focus, for me, drawing that focus onto the age of work in progress is going to give you that idea of whip limits, right? And where you should be paying attention, because if you're pulling more and more in, your age is I'm going to say potentially. I'm going to sit in the camp of probably more likely. It's going to get longer and longer, and so that's where the strategy lies. Hey, sure, you could create a whip limit for the whole board, and that will give you a strategy, but it's probably not going to give you enough information. And I think this is where you need to look at actually a leading metric, such as age, to actually draw that focus into what's happening with the team and how much attention they're paying.
Yeah, I see Daniel nodding to that as well. So we move on to the next point. So just going back to the guide, we're going to come back to the comments again. But if we were just to kind of talk about why use Kanban here, just summarizing, it's about optimizing the flow of value as opposed to maximizing. So trying to find that balance between effectiveness, doing the right thing, and doing it well, doing it as quickly as you can and as best you can, and trying to be more predictable as well. And this is where aging is crucial as well, Andy, isn't it? Because if you don't look after that aging, your cycle times kind of go all over the place, and your 85th percentile SLE goes from 16 days to 25 days, fairly quickly.
I guess the and again, the metrics will tell one story, but it won't kind of present the whole picture. And I think it's if we go back to that, the metrics will give you an indication of where you are and potentially what's happening. And again, it's like potential forecast, if you wish. But I think it's more around the if we look at try and put it in the frame of a customer not getting something and building that outcome, and that's where I've got a classic story which I tell quite a bit whenever I'm talking around optimizing flow or using metrics, and around fixed dates. And actually the metrics I presented didn't really matter at all. It was actually the conversation it created around how much work we could do, how we were going to optimize ourselves as a team to go and deliver against it. What decisions do we have to make? What do we cut? Where are we? Constant. That attention to focus. And I think, that's how kind of for me it all plays in together.
Thank you, Andy. And there's a question for Daniel, and I'll just highlight the piece of the guide that's relevant for this. So Kanban guide is not specifically aimed at software. It's pretty much any type of knowledge work, really. We've proved it in quite a number of areas, but we don't think it's that limited. I think people should be able to test it in other areas. And the question for Daniel is, it's from Gil, and it's if we want to promote business agility, not just software development agility, how would you recommend going about the business use to see the value of Kanban? That's for you, Daniel.
Yeah, there's about 50 questions in one here, and maybe that's kind of on purpose. I don't know. Maybe that was the intention of this. But the first thing I kind of want to address is a lot of people come to ProKanban.org and they assume that what we're talking about here is specifically software development, and even more specifically, software development teams. And if you read through the guide, you will see that nowhere in the guide, and John, I know you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that nowhere in the guide do we talk about software specifically, and nowhere in the guide do we talk about teams specifically. And we worked really, really hard to keep this as generic as possible because of the belief in this, the need to address this kind of more end-to-end business agility. I don't care if you're doing software or something else. I don't care if you're at the team level, the portfolio level, the strategic level. I don't care where you are. Flow exists, and these flow principles, need to be adhered to. Either, there's a quote out there. Either you need to limit your whip, or your whip will limit you. People really, really, really need to understand that. And when we do talk about business agility, so many other industries, understand these concepts so much better than software. In fact, as software, we're really, really far behind some of these other industries. A lot of people like to talk about manufacturing. Manufacturers have been doing this since the 1940s. Actually, even before that, really. That to me, it's just, I always say this, and I know it's a bit hyperbole, but I truly believe it. It's like businesses who understand this thing will survive, and the businesses who don't won't. I'm waving my hands a lot here, and I know I'm not really answering the question directly, but that's what I believe. I mean, flow is around us. It's one of these mystical forces of the universe that as a business you need to understand. Period.
I've seen. Go ahead. Sorry, I was going to say I've seen it a couple of surprising places. Do you remember the Bloodhound, the world record attempt for the fastest land car? It was like had a Typhoon jet engine, and I found out it was actually being built probably about a mile and a half from my house in Bristol, in a kind of really anonymous shed. And I got the opportunity to walk into and go and have a tour of the manufacturing floor, and amazing. But what I discovered were Kanban boards. I discovered this visual workflow. I decided this by each component of the car they had these boards and what's in progress, and it was kind of I was a little bit geeked out. I have to say I was a little bit geeked out, but it was kind of just a really nice way of kind of showing that it's, we, like Daniel was saying, right? We talk about software a lot. The other example is working with a director, a board of directors for a large insurance company, and they were doing business agility. Although the implications of their choices and changes were going to impact software and their website, actually the decisions they were making were, P&L and adhering to like corporate objectives. They were creating Kanban boards.
Indeed. I'm going to go to Chimpanzee next. He's got a comment there. So he's saying, so visualizing priority work and limiting WIP is a significant threat to the dark economy of middle management busy work. How do you deal with this in your engagements? And I can tell you one of the ways that I deal with this, that, well, first of all, I try to work with people who want to do things anyway. I'm not in the convincing business. Other people do, and that's fine, and I respect that. But what I do is I work with a team, and I say, well, here's a few options, and Kanban might be one of them. And we might do a simulation, might use Twig, an Actionable Agile, the Twig game, and they get to see how it works and so on. And what I love to do during the Twig simulation is being rewarded when you run your Monte Carlo forecast several times during the simulation, and you can see that those managers were anxious at the start because all that stuff is still on the options pool, and you haven't brought it in, and we need to get it finished and all this kind of stuff. And then you show that when they actually limit work in progress, when they control their WIP, that their Monte Carlo is rewarding them with better forecasts. And that's really, so what I kind of say to people is, yeah, there'll be a bit of anxiety at the start, but you will be rewarded. There is a bit of a lag before you see that coming in, but it's that's when the pressure kind of comes off then. Daniel, what have you done, and how have you reacted to these kind of situations where people wanted to be busy all the time?
I'm kind of with you. The most enlightened manager that I ever worked with, and I'm not gonna, as much as I'd like to give him a shout out, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get him in trouble. But when we were implementing Kanban, he was actually at the director level. He would go around and tell his people, I would rather you go home than start anything new. Right? They were just so overloaded with work that he was encouraging people. I mean, I think he was half facetious. I don't know if he was totally serious, but just trying to really ingrain in people this understanding that, when you're overloaded like this, the absolute worst thing you can do is to start new work. Yeah, I mean, the sooner we get out of this idea of people always need to be busy, the better. The second and once you understand flow, then you realize that having people busy all the time is, again, one of the worst things you can do. Yeah,
and it's kind of ironic as well, because when people have too many things to do, then they've got too many meetings, particularly these days because we're online. So we're having all these calls and it's back to back, and before you know, you haven't had anything all day. And recently someone told me, well, I've got 2 projects, and I realize now that I've actually had one that I probably wouldn't have meeting mania and probably getting that finished. And anyway, that second project is actually a bit more dramatic than I thought it would be. So I've actually brought trouble on myself. So that's all we do with that, chimpanzee. Let us know if that works for you. Matthew came in with a nice comment saying, I feel safe tonight, John. Phew. Nice one, Daniel Vacanti. Thank you very much for that. Minton, regular viewer. Thank you, Minton, for coming in. I've got another comment here. I ran Kanban training with a mix of change and ops call center. The ops people were horrified that the change department didn't know how to understand flow at all. It was second nature to the ops team. Yeah, see that a lot.
Yep.
And sometimes you have to use metaphors with people as well. Like I do some work in Geneva, and sometimes you can say, well, if you just fill the Mont Blanc tunnel with cars, no one's going to get anywhere. And people kind of understand those kind of things, if it's kind of a local metaphor, it kind of really works. Thank you for that. Then we've got another comment from Mr. Zliebek. I hope I didn't pronounce your name properly. I hope that I did pronounce it properly. Does this ever go beyond the process of focus on leadership? Does it ever go beyond processes and focus on leadership? Can gains be extended by having a high degree of autonomy? Personally, that is what has given me the greatest gains. I can say that one of the things that I tried to do is I tried to educate leaders on the flow analytics and see the impact of what's going on. Andy, what have you tried?
Wrong button. I was trying to come off mute. My 8-year-old was talking outside the door, so I had to mute myself.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So, well, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna sit in the kind of wavy hands kind of thing for this, because this is very much an it depends. It depends on how open that team are to recognizing that they need to probably adapt, and there are so many examples right now. In the last 6 months, we all know where we are right now, and something that sparked my brain thinking a minute ago, which is we really are right now blurring the lines between what is a meeting and what is a constructive gathering of people to focus. And I think this is where personally I'm seeing a lot of management struggle, because they're seeing a lot of stressed out, tired people, because a lot of people are trying to communicate more than they've ever had to before, physically make an effort. So this is why I kind of sit in that kind of wavy hand line, like, yeah, absolutely. But I think actually we're probably seeing, right now we're seeing kind of more effects, just not necessarily, a Kanban focused topic, but I think it's, it's definitely, it's definitely an interesting topic.
Thank you. So we should probably, just watching the time here, so we should probably just walk through the guide a bit more and show people ProKanban as well. We've talked about the practices at a high level already, so defining and visualizing your board, but there's a very important section in the guide, which is the definition of the workflow. And actually the first time this struck me was when I saw the Kanban guide for Scrum teams, and when I was doing the training, and I kind of realized that, if you get this right, everything else kind of falls into work item aging is crucial, of course, but really understanding what your workflow is, what are the steps in your process, where does work start, where does it finish? In a lot of cases, you could have multiple start points and multiple end points, and that's completely okay. Which means you got multiple WIP definitions and multiple throughputs. So cycle time is really essentially the length of time from a start point to an end point plus 1 day. Because if you start and finish something today, you don't say the cycle time is 0. You round it up to 1. So. And you can have multiple start points, end points. You can even have a cycle time just on one column. You could have multiple columns. A lot of the time I see maybe 2 or 3. In fact, what I'm doing at the moment in my current case, I'm trying to link Kanban boards together in a value stream. So there'll be a cycle time on one board, another cycle time on another board, and there's an overall cycle time. It's absolutely crucial getting this right. And really as well, maybe trying to focus on where the team has some kind of span of control, where they, it's something that they can influence. They can later then look at expanding their workflow as they get more influence upstream and more influence downstream. But really trying to get a handle on the work. And so the start points, the end points, what's your work in progress, the items in between, and the number of items in between, and your service level expectation is crucial. You'll start off with a guess because you won't have any history at the start. How long do we think it'll take us to finish work? And then the data will come in after a number of weeks, and you'll have a good idea, maybe even after a few days, and you can then at that point look at all you can look at your cycle time scatter plot, and you can say 85% of the dots are below that, so that's a fairly good SLA. We think we can, if we have an item and we start this single item, we think we can finish it in 16 days or less, something like that. Really crucial part of Kanban getting this right, and that's why we spend so much time on getting that right, and that's why there's another practice to review that and improve that as well. So defining the workflow, actively managing the items in the system, watching your aging, watching your blockers, and then of course reviewing and improving the workflow. Anything you want to add to that, Dan?
No, I think you hit it pretty nicely.
The other thing as well is a lot of people forget as well that you need to have policies. And policies that I like to have would be like maybe exit criteria out of each column, for example. You could also have entry criteria into a column. You can do it both ways if you want to. Maybe you might have some kind of policy for how do we decide what work to start and which work we start, what work even goes into the system. And you might have you can call it a replenishment policy or a start policy. You might have a pull policy or move policy. So if I've got 10 items in progress, or there's a team of 3 of us, Dan, myself, and Andy, okay, which item do we move today? Having a policy and having that agreed is very, very useful. It really cuts down on decision-making time. And of course, you can, because we're going to be reviewing this workflow, you can review those policies at any time. And we don't have any events in the guide, but you can periodically review that. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, no. So it's one of the things actually I think it's gets forgotten is actually the policy side, right? So it's quite easy to set up your work and manage it, but actually, the whole concept of defining how work it goes back to that active management of work in progress, and those policies, I think I can't overstate how important those policies are, in terms of helping the management and actually understand the aging, etc., and ensuring the team are focused in the right space. And it's everyone goes Kanban, whip, visualization, but actually, like having those, I'm going to call them rules of the game because that's where my brain is today. But like, how are we going to work together and ensure we're doing the right thing? Just as important and cannot be understated.
Now, I'm going to get on to something controversial because the measures are very interesting in the guide. And we had a lot of discussion, of course, about, what are the measures and so on. And these are the ones that we went for, work in progress, how much work is in the system, throughput, how much stuff are you delivering per time period, per day, per week, per month, whatever your time frame is. Work item age, so for each item, how old are they, how long has it been since they kind of went into past the start point and going to heading towards your end point, and cycle time. And a lot of people say to us, well, why don't you have flow efficiency, but Daniel has a whole drunk agile episode on that, so I'll make sure I put the link in the bottom of he talks drinking over whiskey about flow efficiency, because basically the bottom line was, I think, Daniel, you're saying it wasn't as actionable as the other measures, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the bottom line. Yeah, bottom line. Yep.
Yeah. Because like if you have a flow efficiency of 15%, okay, that's bad, or is it bad? But if it's 50%, it's like, okay. If it's 45%, if it's 65%, like what do I do? So whereas these ones are a bit more actionable. So check out Drunk Agile on YouTube. It's good fun.
Just very, very quickly, Don Reinertsen even weighed in on it and gave an example on Twitter about how you can have an excellent flow efficiency, but have a terrible process. You're actually making things worse. And we missed that on the Drunk Agile episode. So thanks to Don for pointing that out as well.
Yeah. And thankfully, we've got a really nice community growing now. And a few members of the community were saying to us, it's all very well to have these measures, have these metrics, but they don't really come to life until you kind of visualize them somehow, and you can kind of show some of the trends, how things going. So that's crucial. We don't really say which ones you should use, but maybe if you looked at Actionable Agile, that'd be kind of giving you some good hints about what you could. But trying to kind of bring your metrics to life so you can see the trends actually, and be careful as well not to judge people by charts. Because you need context. There's always context behind the charts. And for example, in my current situation, we have a cycle time, not quite like coronavirus, but kind of going the wrong way. But when you look at the work item types, when you color by work item type, that part of the guide's an additional thing that you can have. Different work items might have different types. And when we color them that way, you could see that some work was taking longer because that work would take, it's a different type of work. So just be careful. It's just you start a useful conversation. And what I tend to say to people, look, is I want you to see what I'm seeing, but I also want to see what you're seeing. Can we try to align and meet somewhere in the middle on that?
Yeah, I was chatting with a coach last week, and we were talking about the data that she'd been capturing around her team, and I presented a quite an old story in terms of capturing metrics and throughput data, and I was presenting it as a story, and I was saying, look, we captured data for nearly 2 years, and we were able to kind of look at the story and kind of talk it back through. And so like you say, John, right? So it's that tool for a conversation, but also, can you tell a story of, how things have gone in order to help you, going forward? What lessons can you learn? And like you say, right, not getting so hung up on it. It is that focus for me.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. And so, there's a few comments, but I'm keen to look at ProKanban.org as well. But there's a wonderful community growing behind the Kanban guide. I've had a question from Chimpanzee saying, why don't we have classes of service? There's lots of things that people think are included in Kanban, like, for example, values, principles, lenses, agendas, teams, roles. And we talk about them in the addendum. If you go to kanbanguides.org, and you look at the addendum, we say, okay, there's some things that are optional and not required, and there's other things maybe recommended and not required. And we talk to a lot of these, and if you want to do them, it's absolutely fine. We just wanted to come up with something that basically most of the Flow Kanban people could agree on. So something that would try to unite the community. We don't. Well, Daniel actually is famous for some of his talks. I love his talk. Was it an expedite request sunk the Titanic?
Yeah.
So check that out on Vimeo. Brilliant talk.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know if Chimpanzee, you're just having maybe you've seen some of this stuff and you're having a dig at me, which is fair enough, fine. But just to be clear for everybody out there, the reason class of service isn't in the guide is, number one, classes of service are not and never have been a part of Kanban. And number two, one of the worst things you can do, if your goal is to achieve flow, one of the absolute worst things you could do, other than having too much work in progress, is implement class of service. So anybody who advocates for classes of service is not advocating for flow. So that's the short answer on that.
Check out the video. Brilliant talk. A couple of other, go to Matthew, and then I go to Gary, and we'll have a look at ProKanban. So I'm going to try and wrap up in about 10 minutes. And so can you guys talk about nested Kanbans, flow on a flow, primary and secondary flows, distributed flows, live stream in itself, Matthew?
I was just going to say that's an episode in itself, John. We need to cover that. Yeah.
Can we maybe, Matthew, if you could come back for that, because that could take at least 20 minutes, and I'm sure we'd have a cold can of worms there and loads of questions and comments, be like a flood. So if you could be patient with us, maybe if Daniel's keen, we might have a follow-up session to dig into that. That's a really good thing. It'd be lovely to kind of dig into more detail and really get into it, and say to people at the next show that, well, I hope you watched the previous show, because we're not going to talk about what we did in the previous show. We're going deeper now. So lovely if you could do that, Matthew. Gary has another message. This is great stuff, especially the discussion about aging, not something I've considered before. Really crucial. And what I say to a lot of the teams I work with, Gary, is that there's two things you get right. Work the board right to left, so try to pull things from the right and look at that work item aging chart and zap that stuff that's in the red, and it's stuff that's taking too long for that column. It's like it should have been out of there long ago for that state in the process. So just they're two crucial things. If you get your aging into the green, that's a lot of things kind of work out for themselves afterwards.
Yeah, it sounds like heresy, but especially coming from a Kanban guide. But the most important metric in Kanban is not work in progress. Believe it or not, it is not. The most important metric by far, is work item age. By far. And the reason work item age is so important is because you can derive anything else that you need to learn about flow. You can essentially derive just by looking at work item age. I'll leave that as an exercise for the reader, but that's why work item age is so important.
Thank you. So I want to talk about ProKanban, because there's so many resources out there. We've talked about Kanban Guide already. So check it out. There will be an update soon as well, so check that out as well. There's a Slack channel for ProKanban, and give a nice short URL. I'll put these links into the YouTube comments later on, or the description, so you can click on it directly. Just go to prokanban.org and go to, I think it's under resources or community or something, and you'll see meetup group, Slack channel, very open community. It's about Kanban diversity, flow diversity. So we don't really get into, if you want to talk about, this is better than that, we're not really into those conversations. We just want to talk about what Kanban Guide is and how we can help people. So there's a meetup, fantastic community hosted by Jose Casal and JP Bailey. So there's a little short link for that as well. Very active, and yours truly will be speaking on the 16th of December. So check that out. I'm sure Andy will be roped in as well at some point. Daniel has already done his bit. Yeah. And if you want to get trained, you can get trained by some wonderful people. I actually have pictures of much better looking trainers than me, so I'm just going to show them now. So I heard it was 18 trainers right now, something like that. So
it's over 15 now, at least, for sure.
Yeah, Julia, Colleen, Dan, and myself, of course. JP, Jose, Wilbert, He works with me.
Hey,
The
there's
year,
Andy.
Troy, Yuval, Ryan, Mark, and there's more to come. So check that out. Lots of really good trainers in ProKanban.org. And in addition to that, if anybody out there is thinks they're really skilled and they'd like to become a trainer, there's a link, ProKanban.org, under training. You can pick that out. You can also test your knowledge. You'll need to get over 95% in the assessment. It is a tough assessment. We kind of over-egged the difficulty of it, but it's tough. So you have to read the guide. If you don't read the guide, we'll have no pity for you. Read the guide, read the guide, read the guide. And if it's not written in the guide, it probably means that we think it's not needed. We probably say it's optional. We're not saying it's not good, but it's not needed. So don't be thinking, oh, you have to have this and you have to have that. So maybe check out the addendum, and then when you read it, oh, that's optional too? Yeah, dude, it's optional. Okay, so check that out. Don't trip up on that. So there's also an open assessment. So if you don't want to kind of lose $200 straight away, if you want to just check yourself, check what's going on, just to do the open assessment. And a reminder again that there is the Secret History of Kanban, so you can check that out. Lean Agile Global, also Agile Lean Ireland. There's a few talks. Darren Davis as well on YouTube. So check that out. We didn't zone in on that today. We wanted to focus on you guys understanding what the guide is all about and hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and wonderful trainers like Andy as well in terms of how that all works. Anything you want to add to that, Daniel?
No, that's all great information. I mean, I think we've thrown way too much information at people for 1 hour.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Right,
so let's
I should come back.
Yeah. So some final questions. So I'm just looking here. So I think it's only one or two actually, so it's not too bad. So I've got a question about Professional Kanban 1, how hard it is. Looking forward to passing it. Yeah, it's hard.
Well, I mean, the way I would say it is, to me, it's like any test. Any test you take. Andy, I think, can speak to this maybe better than anybody. If you prepare for it and you take it seriously, you'll do well. If you don't prepare for it and you don't take it seriously, you won't do well. I mean, I think it's just like anything. You can't show up and expect to pass it. That's just not how it works.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So join the Slack channel. Yeah, go on, Andy. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to echo that. It's think about flow, not what you think you know about Kanban, and read the guide. I think that's all I'll say to add to that. And I think that's it. I think and do the open assessment. Right, the open assessment is a good assessment, and it gives you feedback, which is even better.
Yeah, thank you very much. So question from Chimpanzee. So there are so many books. Sorry, I haven't flashed it up yet. There are so many. What are your top 3 Kanban books? I'll just shout out there, When Will It Be Done? And Actionable Agile Metrics by Mr. Daniel Vacanti. I really enjoyed it. Wonderful storyteller. You feel like you're watching one of the talks when you're reading his books. Very easy to digest. I'm struggling for a third book. Andy, what would you pick as a...
So I've got a non-Kanban book. It's the Clark Ching, not Rolling Rocks, the Bottleneck Rules. I just really like that book. It's really short and succinct. It talks about flow, in some sense, but it's really kind of, it's just a nice way of educating people around, how flow can work and bottlenecks in that process. It's a good book.
Daniel, what are your thoughts? Yeah. If you had to pick a book.
I don't know if I can say my top 3. I can say the top 3 I would definitely not recommend, but I don't know that I don't know if I should mention those. Yeah, the ones. The only other maybe one I would say is I'm trying to look if it's on my bookshelf. Klaus Leopold's Practical Kanban, not bad.
Yeah.
I mean the one book I do have on my bookshelf, just
a new one as well. Yeah.
The one book I do have. I mean, if you don't know, if you don't know this book, forget about it. Just forget about it.
Yeah, it's 101. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Don Reinertson's Principles of Product Development Flow.
Yeah. Another one I like as well, we're giving you more than 3 now, would be the recent 10-Flow book, 10-Year Workflow book. I really like that. Very, very deep. It's so plenty of section there for you guys. Yeah. Hopefully that's good enough for you. Andre has a comment. Thank you for the hints. Yeah, good stuff, Andre. Andre's done a lot of qualifications this year. He's really done very well. He got, I think he got all the Scrum.org certifications. He became a safe trainer. He's looking at us, right? So good for you, Andre. And thank you to Andre. And may the low be with you. The flow, is it?
Yeah, I think the next chat he did.
Yeah,
Says,
he fixed it. Yeah. Okay. And we got a cheerio no chaps from James, I think. And so thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll take some final comments now, just where we're going to close out. Andy, any final words from you?
Oh gosh, no. Thank you for having me. I mean, you know, as I've said, I'm always honoured to be in such fine company, and yeah, it's I don't know. I'm excited about this whole thing. I was excited when James, who unfortunately has left, you know, gave me you know, this thing coming, and so I got all excited when that happened, and I'm, you know, so stoked to be a trainer now. But it's really kind of like helping me cement what I've been doing with teams for years and years and years. And you know, again, as I said earlier, it's, you know, I can now point them somewhere, and I can now actually you know, instead of feeling like the lunatic talking about this thing, we can actually kind of like, you know, I can create my own little mini asylums, I think, you know, as I go around. So that's my final comment. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. Pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you. Any final words from you, Daniel?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just wanted to echo Andy's sentiment. I mean, the pleasure is all mine whenever I get a chance to share a microphone with John and Andy. So, I mean, I was thrilled when I got that invite to do that. I guess my final comment would be just a call to action to everybody out there. I mean, please come check us out at ProKanban.org. We're really, because all of us were noobs at one point, and we're really looking to help you learn. And like I said, give you a safe space to learn about this stuff. So please come and check us out. We want to amplify those new voices. You know, I'm kind of sick and tired of looking at myself, if I'm honest, you know, and I want to hear from other people, and I want to learn from other people. So please give us a shot, and look forward to you all of you participating in the community in the near future.
Thank you, Daniel. So just a reminder for people there, the Slack channel, so please check that out. Also, the meetup group, very active and growing very, very quickly. And if you're interested in getting trained, you've got 3 trainers here looking at them, and there's other trainers there as well. So check out the website for that. And you don't have to go to a training course. You just go online and do the assessment. So that's it. I'm going to ask Andy and Daniel to stay on now for a while, but I'm going to say goodbye to everybody else for the evening. And I want to thank you very much for joining us and for being so engaged in the session. And also thank you very much as well for people watching the recording later on. About 10 to 15 times the number of people actually watch the recording now. So thank you for that. Okay, over and out, everyone. Thank you. Thanks,
everybody. Have a great night. Stay safe. Be well.